Adam Stern will join us in about 5 minutes. He covers motorsports and esports for Sports Business Journal. We'll talk about Kyle Larson. It may have taken a few hours longer than some thought, but he was eventually fired yesterday by Ganassi Racing, and Ross Chastain may be the one that is next in line in order to fill that chair.
That's interesting to me because he also is rumored to be the guy to get into the Hendricks team. I know he's racing for Ganassi on Xfinity, but there's a car opening up with the Hendricks team that a lot of people thought that Ross was the leader in the clubhouse for. He may have some big decisions to make after this season.
Well, and that might be a reason also why Ganassi puts him in that seat now.
Bingo. And how long do we have a delay in NASCAR? What happens to the season? You think they're going to start sooner? We've said all along, NASCAR, golf, those are two sports that we think can keep on keeping on a lot more quickly. First thing I thought of when you started talking about that is, man, he was lined up for that Hendricks car, and you're right. Ross may have some great choices in front of him, and Ganassi may have to react quickly in order to get Ross Chastain because he is, of guys without a ride, he's the hottest guy out there.
Well, and he's got a ride on the main series, but it's with a smaller race team that, while they're a little more competitive with motors this year, but yeah, I mean, he had his best finishes last year on the super speedways in which he basically had those finishes by attrition, and he's a top-notch driver on the truck and Xfinity series. We'll talk to Adam Stern coming up here in a moment. Mike Oresco, the commissioner of the AAC, is going to join us at the top of the hour. And
got your caller.
If you watch us on Twitch, Mark and I were going at it pretty good and not disagreeing with one another, but getting very animated about all of the issues that are seemingly coming to the forefront now in college athletics, stuff that was being discussed years ago, and now because of the economic landscape changing so dramatically because of the coronavirus, there are those that believe major changes are going to be coming to college athletics. We'll talk to Mike Oresco about that coming up in a half an hour. But as previously mentioned, Adam Stern is kind enough to join us on the Goldberg Noon Abraham Law Firm hotline. Local people, local practice, local knowledge, goldberg-law.com. He covers motorsports and esports for Sports Business Journal. Follow Adam on Twitter at @A_S12. And Adam, first off, thanks so much for your time. But secondly, we're asking all our guests these days, as sincerely as we can offer it up, how are you and your families doing during all this, and where are you hunkered down?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on for the kind words and the question. Yeah, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. It looks like it's the start of what it should be a nice day here, and been lucky enough to just be, as you said, hunkered down from coronavirus and praying for everyone in America and Florida, all over this country and this world, to just get through this as soon as possible. And looking forward to that light at the end of the tunnel.
No doubt. Well, Adam, one of the lights at the end of the tunnel has been esports and the iRacing series. NASCAR has done a hell of a job of keeping out in front of the sports world, but unfortunately, while doing something that has been entertaining, has been viewed, has had a couple of big problems. First, Bubba Wallace rage quitting, which seems trivial to the Kyle Larson issue when he drops an N-bomb over the radio, loses his ride, Ganassi loses McDonald's. How big of a blow is this to all of the goodwill that NASCAR may have been getting from the e-racing?
It's colossal, and I would agree with you that the Bubba Wallace thing totally, to say it pales in comparison to the Kyle Larson thing is an understatement. I mean, it's extremely different. And yes, they did happen in 2 weeks. You're exactly right, and you are right to bring that up. How they happened, 2 weeks in succession. But yes, the Larson thing is a fiasco of the highest magnitude. If you zoom all the way out from a 30,000-foot view perspective, as you were just saying in your intro, iRacing was basically just something that the sport was using to help everyone get through the coronavirus pandemic. It was helping, give fans something to do. It was giving drivers a way to not get rusty and kind of stay on their game, because obviously it's a very real platform, and that's part of why it's had such success. Is it's so realistic, and drivers have embraced it. And part of them embracing it was, obviously if you go to races, or even if you don't and you have the right equipment, you can dial into drivers' radios during real-life races. And there's kind of this, similar notion with digital races where these drivers were airing them on their Twitch pages. And because of that, you're able to hear some of the driver communications. And so, for a driver like Kyle Larson, who's been touted as a rising star, he was coming up on a free agency year where a lot of major teams were likely to chase his services, represented by some very major companies, including one of literally the biggest companies in the world, McDonald's. One of the most well-known restaurants in the world, McDonald's. To have that all fall apart because of using a racial slur in a digital race while you're just trying to keep fans happy during the coronavirus pandemic, and everyone is desperate to get back to real-life racing, and now his real-life racing career is destroyed for the immediate future at minimum. It's a fiasco of the highest magnitude, and it's a disaster for NASCAR.
There's many layers to this, Adam, and we got about 10 minutes, so let's try to cover as much ground as we can. How come it took 24 hours to get to yesterday? Was Ganassi trying to salvage Kyle's career and the relationship, and they quickly realized this isn't salvageable, or was this just a technicality and they wanted to go through the contract and make sure they could do this?
I mean, look, this situation, to say this came out of nowhere is an understatement. I mean, this situation came out of absolutely nowhere. You're talking about a kid who was seen as a rising star that before Sunday night, they were working their butt off to see how they could possibly keep him at a time when all the other sports' best teams were trying to chase his services. So this came out of absolutely nowhere.
No, I get that. Adam, I get that. No, Adam, hold on. I get that. But he dropped the N-word. I mean, I got to be honest. That's a 90-second thing. Honestly, if I was Ganassi, I would have fired him Sunday night. I mean, that's all I'm wondering. Were they trying to figure out how big was this going to get, and let's try to salvage this, and quickly realized, oh, blank, we can't? Or was it just a technicality, and they were just going through the contracts and making sure they could fire him?
Yeah, I would say it's probably more the latter. I mean, obviously, if you want to get into the details of why they didn't fire him within 90 seconds, I would recommend bringing on Chip Ganassi himself. But, yeah, I mean, it was a situation where they have several major sponsors. These are extremely complicated contracts. So, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, technically speaking, they could have said, like, contracts be damned, I'm still going to fire you just within a minute because this is so wrong, and then I'll work out the contracts from there. But they chose to go about the other way. They worked out the contracts, and then they announced it. So I would say just because of how complicated the situation is with contracts, probably why it took that long.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right, Adam, our poll question yesterday was really simple, and I'm curious of how you would answer this. David said that he's done. I said that he's not. The question is his career over? And this is a big deal, and my son's a big NASCAR. He's a North Carolina native. I talked to him, and he goes, come on, in a sport where the rest of the world already looks at this sport as a little bit of a redneck sport, they can't let this guy back in. David's point is it's sponsors. It's not like it's golf or tennis where you're earning your own money. And mine, lastly, is we're forgiving. We forgive people. So, Adam, as talented as he is, with what happened, do you see him ever racing NASCAR again?
I think he'll definitely get a second chance. I think what's not known right now is whether it's going to be a second chance with a premium team, a premier team like he was with, and like he was going to potentially be with other premier teams if he had left because of free agency this year, or is his second chance going to be with a back marker, or with at best a mid-tier team? So I think that's the open question. I mean, 10 years from now, if Larson continues to try and be in NASCAR, a decade from now, do I see literally no one having given him a second chance? No, I think that's going to be proven incorrect. Is it going to be a top-tier team with good sponsors? That's a little bit more of an open question. I wouldn't 100% rule that out. If he works his butt off to try and do a redemption effort, could it happen? I think it's possible, but, yeah, it's probably at least 6 months to a year away minimum, and you're going to have, even at that point, you're going to have to find the right sponsor, the right CEO, the right team owner who are all on board to give this kid a second chance. So it's not going to be easy, but I think, if he tries his butt off, I think it's possible.
He's Adam Stern. He covers motorsports and esports for Sports Business Journal. Follow Adam on Twitter, _S 12. All right. Well, we're very interested in who's going to take Kyle Larson's seat. Ross Chastain is from our neck of the woods, and he's filling in for Ryan Newman right now, but he's running for Ganassi on the Xfinity Series. Who do you think's the leader in the clubhouse to replace Kyle Larson?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ross is naturally going to get a look, for sure, because he's already affiliated with Ganassi. And, there was already some talk about him maybe coming in at some point in the next year or two, like, for example, after Kurt Busch retired, maybe in a year or two. So I think clearly Ross is going to get a look. He's done a great job filling in, for Ryan Newman at Roush Fenway after Ryan's crazy crash at the Daytona 500. Jamie McMurray might be another name to keep an eye on. He's a former Ganassi driver. He's still relatively young as far as, NASCAR standards. He's only, I think, in his early 40s, so he's not too old to, get back in the car in a substitute position. And so I would think one of those two guys most likely, either you bring your former longtime guy McMurray out of retirement, or, you go with your kind of next young star in Ross Chastain. At this point, it's too early to say for sure. I mean, I guess theoretically there could be a dark horse that emerges, but you would think that one of those two guys will get it. Chastain has been driving, again, with Roush Fenway kind of in the substitute role for Newman, so the two teams would have to work that out. But ultimately, Ganassi more so has his contractual rights, and they loaned him out to Roush Fenway kind of as a favor. So I think they would be able to claw him back. I would look for one of those two names most likely.
Adam, the e-racing is going to continue. How much is NASCAR having Zoom meetings with its drivers right now? I mean, how much in order to continue this? Because, David and I spent 3 weeks talking about how great this was. I am literally on my phone with my 20-year-old son going, I'm thinking about getting a simulator. If I get you one for your birthday, will you race with me? And I mean, I'm fascinated by this, and I am the most non-motorsports person on the planet. But when you have this type of incident, as you said, is catastrophic, where do they go and how do they ensure that they can keep doing this? Because this now has been a stain on NASCAR as opposed to what it really was intended for, as a popular way to keep the sport out in front of people when there's nothing to watch.
Yeah, it's a great question, and they're trying to figure that out on the fly. And just to give you an example, they've kind of got this main Pro Invitational Series, which is the one that Fox Sports has been televising. That's the main kind of iRace. But there's been these kind of unofficial other events. And in fact, that's what Kyle Larson was participating in on Sunday night. It wasn't NASCAR's main official event that was on Fox Sports. There's been some of these other kind of smaller events. And just to give you an example, there was a different one that was originally going to be aired on NASCAR's website. And then late last night, they announced that NASCAR is no longer going to air it on their website. So, I think that we're already starting to see some effects. I think the honeymoon is over to an extent. That being said, they're going to, of course, continue on with their, main series, the main one that they're doing with Fox. And, the next race is this Sunday from virtual Richmond. And, look, I think everyone has a sour taste in their mouth now because of this incident. So, they're not going to just completely give up on this. I mean, it would be a little bit of a bad precedent to just say we're going to give up on an initiative that's been having a lot of success just because, one driver did a horrible thing. But at the same time, yes, you're exactly right. I mean, this does take a lot of wind out of the sails. And look, I mean, I think this week will probably be the toughest. I think this weekend, when everyone, the fans, the industry, the announcers are doing the race, watching the race, people are going to, certainly have Larson top of mind. And just like everything with time, it'll get a little bit easier from there. But yes, this has taken a lot of momentum out of this, initiative. And again, people were just trying to do this as a way to keep people happy and fresh and interested during the coronavirus pandemic. And now it's turned into such a different situation. It's a little bit sad, but it is what it is.
These races have been averaging a little over 1 million viewers if you add them all up between FS1 and Fox. I mean, NASCAR and Fox are going to want to continue these. I mean, you can get 7-figure viewership right now. Those things don't normally go away. Adam, final question. What are you hearing as to when NASCAR is thinking about racing again? The PGA Tour reportedly is going to announce today or tomorrow, June 11th is when they're going to play again, and they're going to do it without fans. We have always thought golf and racing could be the two sports that start back up the soonest. When are you hearing NASCAR is likely to start back up?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think, that's kind of been the predictions, and we obviously saw that golf is looking at starting now back up in June. I'm looking at NASCAR in a similar timeline from what I hear. They're still currently aiming for the end of May but they're certainly very much open to delaying that if need be into June. Currently, I think what their idea would be starting back up May 24th at Charlotte Motor Speedway. It easily could get delayed into June. My understanding is that even if it gets delayed into June, they still might start at Charlotte for the first race because the industry is based in that city. And, that would allow the first race to happen and get that first race under their belts without even having to take flights, which is, airplanes are going to be an extra kind of thing to get through. But yeah, they are looking at trying to get back, I think, as soon as June, and it's likely going to be without fans, just like golf. But I think at this point, people in the industry, they would rather do that because the media dollars are really what's important in the sport. So it's much more important to run a race in a lot of people's eyes, to run a race without fans than to run no race at all, because if you run no race at all, teams are going to lose a lot of money. Teams are going to shut down. So I think that's what they're looking at right now.
Adam, thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it. Love your insight. Stay safe. Be well. Hopefully we can talk again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Adam Stern covers motorsports and esports for Sports Business Journal. Follow Adam on Twitter, _S12, _S12, Adam Stern with Sports Business Journal.
Maybe the greatest answer in the history of our show. Maybe you should call Chip Ganassi for that one.
That's up there.
That's is. Up there. I mean, that to me is as good as no, sir.
Did you ever kill a guy?
You ever kill a guy? No, sir. Maybe you should call Chip Ganassi. Well, you got his number? I'd love to.